Good day, everyone. Welcome back to Oral Communication in Context. For our sixth lesson, we will start discussing the different parts of a communicative strategy. So for today, we will be talking about the different types of speech context and speech style. For today's lesson, the first thing that we will be talking about are the different kinds of speech context. There is an intrapersonal, interpersonal, mass communication, and public communication. We will also be discussing the different speech styles, namely intimate, casual, consultative, formal, and frozen. Before we begin, try to think about this question. How do you spend your time? Many of you probably spend it doing household chores, attending school and completing academic works, playing mobile games, or even enjoying some time hanging out with friends and family. Each of us spends our time differently, but did you know that typical studies suggest that about 70 to 80% of our time is spent in some form of communication? We spend most of our waking hours writing, reading, speaking, and listening. These days, we don't just communicate through face-to-face contact. We also spend a majority of our time interacting in various social media platforms. Therefore, it is essential for us to develop an understanding of how we can communicate more effectively. In order to do so, one must develop a deeper understanding of different strategies to be used in various speech situations. As I have mentioned earlier, there are three different parts of a communicative strategy. There's the speech context, speech style, and the speech act. So for today, for our lesson, we will be discussing speech context and speech style. Let us first define what a speech context is. A speech context is the way that people use to communicate and transmit messages orally or verbally. So basically, speech context refers to how do we communicate and to whom are we communicating these messages. The speech context could easily be identified if you already know the purpose of the communication process or the communication that is taking place. Okay, so you have to ask yourselves the following question. First one is, why are you giving the speech? What is the reason behind this communicative situation? Why are you even talking to that person, or why are you even sending that particular message? Another question that you have to consider in order for you to properly identify the purpose and eventually the speech context is to determine as well who will be your target audience or your intended audience. Who are you giving the speech to? Who will be listening to you? Who will be receiving the message? Who will be receiving the information idea from you? There are four major kinds of speech contexts, namely intrapersonal, interpersonal, public communication, and mass communication. So let's talk about them one at a time. When we say intrapersonal, by the term itself, intra, meaning the communication centers around one person. And since it's intra, within you, inside you, the communication takes place where the speaker acts both as the sender of the message and the receiver of the message. Therefore, it's only one person. It's happening within one person. Okay, some of you might be wondering, ma'am, is that possible? How is that going to happen? Okay, now you would notice that people tend to talk to themselves. Okay, so it's a way for us to release stress or take something out of our mind. Now, when you do that, when you kind of talk to yourself, when the conversation is happening within you or with you alone, it's called an intrapersonal communication. For example, when you spend the night thinking and analyzing why your crush from the other class talked to you on the way home, that is already a form of intrapersonal communication. Another example is whenever you feel happy while thinking about how your teacher appreciated your work in class. However, people do not just communicate with their own selves. More often than not, communication takes place between us and another person. So when this happens, it's already called interpersonal communication. Therefore, interpersonal communication can be simply described as a type of communication that happens between and among people. And more often than not, interpersonal communication is used or is utilized to establish personal relationships between and among them. We want to form a connection with another person, a person who we could share ideas, exchange ideas with, feelings, emotions, and so on and so forth. It is also important for you to remember that interpersonal communication also has two different forms. The first one is what we refer to as dyad communication. Now, dyad communication is simply described as a type of interpersonal communication that occurs between two people. So there are only two people that act as the communicators. Either one could be a listener, either one could be the receiver, or vice versa. So take for example, a very good example of this one is when you are helping out a classmate. You are doing one-on-one tutoring, or you are doing one-on-one lecture with that classmate of yours. You are helping out each other with your group work or with your assignments or homeworks. Another good example of this is when someone else needs comfort from you. So you have to comfort them on a personal level. You talk to them one-on-one and you do it just the two of you. Now, interpersonal communication doesn't only occur when there are only two people involved. It could also happen when there are a few more people conversing or interacting. This type of interpersonal communication is now called small group communication. Small group interpersonal communication usually involves at least three, but not more than 10 people. And these people, they work together, engage in face-to-face interaction in order for them to achieve a desired goal. Basically, it's like a meeting with only a few people involved, okay? So if there are already more than two people involved in the communicative situation, but less than 10 of them interacting together all at once, then that is what we can refer to as a small group interaction. So an example of this, a very good example of this one, is whenever you are tasked to work with some of your classmates in order to produce a group project, for example. Or another example is if you are a member of an organization, a small organization, or if you are an officer in a small organization, whenever you have meetings with your co-officers, then that could be considered as a small group communication. Again, there are two kinds of interpersonal communication. One is dyad communication where only two people are involved. And we also have small group communication where there are three or more but less than 10 people involved. Another kind of speech context is what we refer to as public communication. Now, there are instances wherein we have to talk or we have to deliver a message in front of a larger audience, meaning there are more than 10 people listening to us. There could be 20, there could be 30, there could even be more, hundreds of them who are listening to you while you talk. When that happens, that could already be considered as a form of public communication. This type of communication actually requires you to deliver or send more often than not an informative or persuasive message before or in front of a group. What does it mean? It only means that whenever we engage in public communication, our intention, our purpose is number one, to inform, to give new ideas, to talk about new things, to share knowledge to the audience. Or it could also be the intent or the purpose could also be to persuade them, to influence them, to motivate them to do something or probably change their way of thinking about a particular issue or a particular situation. Public communication is a very important tool, especially if we want to reach a larger group of people, or we need to deliver a message to a larger group of audience. For example, if you are a valedictorian or a class honor, you graduated with honors and you have to deliver a speech to your batchmates during the graduation ceremony, that is already considered a form of public communication because it was you, there's only one speaker delivering the message to a wide group or large group rather of audience. Another example that we have is whenever you perform in front of an audience. For example, you were asked to sing or you were asked to recite poetry, okay, in front of the whole school or in front of an audience, all right? So those things could be form already of public communication. Last but not the least, the fourth speech context that we have is what we refer to as mass communication. Mass communication is different from public communication because in mass communication, the way that we deliver the message, the medium, or the platform, the channel that we are using to deliver the message usually utilizes mass media tools such as the television, the radio, the newspapers, magazines, books, billboard, the internet, and other types of media. All right. So, ma'am, how is that different from public communication? You are also communicating to a large group of audience. Again, mass communication utilizes media tools, all right? So the message, therefore, is transmitted through television shows, radio shows, printed newspapers, magazine articles, written or published in books, put up in billboards, or maybe posted on the internet. Unlike when you are engaging, for example, delivering a speech live in front of an audience, that could be considered public communication. Okay, so one thing that you have to remember in mass communication is that it only reaches a wide group of audience or a large group of audience because we utilize media tools in order for us to disseminate or give out, deliver the intended message. But with public communication, you already have a specific set of audience involved and are listening or intent on listening to you. Some examples of mass media communication or mass communication is when a news reporter goes live or goes on TV, okay, and delivers the nightly news or delivers daily news. Another form of it is when you are a campus journalist, for example, and you are writing rather articles about your school or about all the events in school, and it gets published in the campus newspaper or in the campus journal, then that could be considered a form of mass communication. You have to remember that mass communication, its main goal is to reach as many people as possible, to deliver the message to as many people as possible by utilizing these media tools. It is also essential that you take note that a speech context dictates and affects the way people communicate. Knowing your audience, knowing the purpose, knowing the intent of your message or the communicative situation will always affect the way that you communicate. And eventually, when you already know, determine, okay, who are your audience, who are the people listening to you, and what is your purpose in the first place, what is your reason, these would eventually result to what we now refer to as another part of communicative strategy, which is speech styles. Okay, so basically, please do take note that your speech style would also depend on your speech context, or your speech context rather would determine your speech style. Since we are already talking about speech style, let us now define it. What is a speech style? From the terms itself, style, how you are presenting your message. It is basically the unique way in which the information is delivered to the audience. It involves the use of your tone, it involves the use of your voice, it involves the use or utilization of the different aspects of voice usage. Even your word choice actually is part of speech style. Whenever we engage in different communicative situations, we adapt to it. Okay, we adapt to it depending on who we are talking to and what is the reason for us to talk to them in the first place, or why are we even talking to them in the first place. Now, the way that we adapt to this one, or we change things up whenever we talk, that could be your speech style. You have to remember that whenever you engage in a communicative situation or an interaction, the people that you are talking to might be different from the other people that you have talked to before. Okay, so it would really affect the way that you would deliver the message that you intend to send or share to them in the first place. Now, according to Jules in 1976, speech style is actually a form of language that the speaker uses by which it is characterized by the degree of formality. So, like what I have mentioned earlier, we try to adapt to the different people that we are talking with. And of course, the context of that situation, the language or how we use our language, how we deliver the message is affected by the people we are talking to or talking with and the context that the communicative situation is taking place. So what are the different kinds of speech styles? There are actually 5. The first one is what we refer to as an intimate speech style. The second one is casual speech style. The third one is consultative speech style. We have the formal, and we have what we call frozen speech style. Let us first discuss what an intimate speech style is. Okay, so this is the style that we use whenever we talk to someone who we share an intimate or a close relationship with. Therefore, the style that you use whenever you communicate with them, the way that you deliver the message, the way that you talk to them, the style is kind of private. It's something that you share between the two of you only. Basically, this kind of speech style only occurs between or among close family members or intimate individuals, like what I've mentioned earlier. It could be your girlfriend or boyfriend or someone who is very, very close with you, meaning your relationship with them is already established. You already know that you could share things with them that you are not ready or willing to share with anyone else. As I have mentioned as well a while ago, the language that you are using may not even be shared in public. So take for example when you talk to your girlfriend or boyfriend or someone special to you, the kind of words that you deliver, how you deliver your messages to them is very different from how you would often deliver a message to a classmate, for example, or a teacher. Now, since you are sharing a very intimate or close relationship with this person, you are very much comfortable opening up yourself to them, talking about anything else, and of course, being comfortable with how you are expressing yourself. The second type of speech style is what we refer to or describe as something that is casual. It is usually used among peers or friends or even your classmates. This is the kind of speech style that we utilize whenever we do so. More often than not, jargons, words that are very particular to your group are used. You can also use slang, street language, gay language, or even vulgar words are used to communicate with them. It's actually almost similar to the first one. However, whenever you share messages with them, you are still holding a part of yourself back, unlike when you share an intimate relationship with someone. So whenever you engage in casual speech style, it's also an indication that you are comfortable talking with those people. But still, of course, these are not people that you are sharing intimate or close relationship with all the time. Okay? So this type of speech style is actually more friendly in tone rather than intimate. Next, we have consultative. It is referred to as the standard style of speech. So whenever you talk to someone who is not your friend, for example, or who is not someone really close to you, you don't share a relationship or a connection with them, this is the kind of speech style that we utilize whenever we communicate with those kinds of people. It is considered professional, and mutually acceptable language is a must in this style. Okay, so you try to avoid using jargons, you try to avoid slangs, you try to avoid words that you are comfortable using to someone who is close to you, because you believe or you understand that this person might, of course, misunderstand the context. All right, so something that you would both understand is the kind of language that we use in this kind of speech style. So take for example, whenever you are talking to professionals such as a doctor, okay, a doctor is not someone that you could always consider as your friend. He or she is someone that you go to whenever you want to talk about medical health problems or medical health conditions. Okay, another example of this is when you talk to your teacher. As students, whenever you talk to your teacher, you cannot use the words that you are using. You cannot use the language that you are using with your friends or with your family to your teacher. Whenever you try to talk to your teacher, there is a level of respect that you incorporate in your speech. Okay, so when you do that, you are actually practicing consultative speech style. Next, we have the formal one. Of course, from the term itself, it is a speech style that we utilize whenever we are in a communicative situation that is formal in setting. It is often, or more often than not, it is one way and very straightforward in nature. So whatever message is being delivered, it's direct to the point. For people who are involved in formal communicative situations, the speeches that they will deliver or the message that they will deliver, the information that they are going to share is usually prepared beforehand. So they had time to think about, to write it down and edit it out, formulate it in such a way that their listeners would understand what they are trying to say or their intent is gonna come across. This is also the reason why formal speeches are complex, kind of complex, because they are well structured and always have logically sequenced and strongly coherent sentences. Because just like what I have mentioned earlier, the intended message must come across, must be delivered right away. Okay, people must understand it right away. Okay, that's why you have to prepare for it in advance as well so that you could do that. Now, when is a formal speech style used? Formal speech styles are usually used when, for example, you have to engage in public communication, like delivering a speech, a graduation speech, or whenever, for example, a priest delivers his homily, all right? So his preaching, a preacher will deliver his preaching, then he or she would use a formal speech style. Last but not the least, we have frozen. Now, this kind of speech style is used during respectful events and ceremonies. Similarly, the speech that you are using in this part of a communicative strategy, it is unchanged over time. It remains the same all throughout the years. It doesn't change. Now, ma'am, what does it mean? It only means that the speech has been set for you. Okay, more often than not, these are things that we have already memorized because we kept on repeating them over and over again during respectful events and ceremonies. They are part of those ceremonies or celebrations. So a good example of this one are prayers. For example, the Lord's Prayer could be considered whenever you recite the Lord's Prayer, the speech style that you use is frozen because the content of the Lord's Prayer hasn't changed over time. Okay, another example of this is when you pledge allegiance to the flag. That could also be using frozen speech style. Okay, as long as it doesn't change, then it could be considered frozen. And there is a very high level of respect that you have to incorporate whenever you deliver the message in this type of speech style. Here are my sources and references. Thank you for joining me today.